very lucky. I'm Julie Brua. I'm the president of LJWC. However, these kinds of events are never, ever, ever put together alone. It is with the work of the entire group who are here tonight as leaders, and also our members who make all of this come together. So we feel very fortunate that we are here in November, special month, Veterans Day month. And so as a result of that, we have brought my neighbor, who is Don Carter. He's going to share with you his journey through World War II. It's a fascinating, fabulous story. And Don told me that he's practicing tonight because then he's coming next week to come to my school and speak to the 6th through 8th graders and tell this. So, but I don't think he needs any practice. So without any further ado, we want to welcome Don Carter and thank you.
I was born in 1925. I'm old. Turned 90. I'm 96 now. I turned 97 on New Year's. I was born on New Year's Day in 1925, and one of the things I remember about it is that people used to come up to me and say, "Boy, I bet your dad was sorry you weren't born the day before. You would have got a whole write-off on the income tax." You ready? When I was born, there was no income tax. Income tax started with President Roosevelt around 34 or 35 in there. So it didn't really matter whether, they didn't have to take me out on a rough road and see if I could come in 20. So anyway, I'm from Hornell, New York. None of you have heard of it. It's a little town. It's smaller than Libertyville by quite a bit, but it's delightful because it's in the Finger Lakes. And I remember when I was a kid, with the boys in the neighborhood, we'd go to school all week, and then we'd get up on Saturday morning and try to figure out which one of 5 lakes we could go swimming in, all within 45 minutes of the house, because in addition to the Finger Lakes, there's a lot of smaller ones in between. And the nice part about, I don't know if you could do it now, but back in those days, you could dive in, open your mouth, and drink the water. That's the way it was. So I had a tough childhood, and growing up in this little town, and when I got to be quite a bit older, the dang Japanese came over and bombed Pearl Harbor, and so I had to go up when I turned how old I was 16 then. So I waited 2 years later when I turned 18, and then I had to go up to the draft board. Every town had a draft board. Go into the draft board and register for the draft. And I was classified as, instead of classifying me as 1A, they classified me as 1C. Anybody know why? I hadn't finished high school yet. And I was in my last half of my senior year of high school. So I turned 18 on January 1, and they deferred me till June 1 to finish high school, which I did. And then after I got out of high school, I went to with all the boys. Now, when you try to visualize this now, it's very difficult. But all the boys of my graduating class would all go down to the train station and take the train down to Camp Upton, New York, and get sworn into the Army. All of them. And they gave us physicals and everything in between there. And we had one boy in our graduating class that didn't go. And I probably should ask somebody what it is, but he had albumin of the kidneys, and that disqualified him. So all the rest of us went. And I do want to, I've done a lot of these stories, but I always try to stay away from naming individuals and things like that, because my wife told me not to do that. But she's not here now, so I'm going to name individuals. And one thing that was interesting in that 6-month period while we were waiting from getting notified until we had to leave, there were probably 7 or 8 boys. I try to remember how many boys there were, about something like 50, 55, 60 in that area. And there were about 5 or 6, 7 that didn't want to go in the Army. They had this Army thing, and they wanted to go in the Navy. So the only way they could go in the Navy is they didn't draft in the Navy, so you had to quit high school sometime in that 6-month period, quit high school, go join the Navy, and then you don't have your high school diploma. And then when the war's over, you got to come back, go back to high school quite a few years late and get your high school diploma. Well, I didn't want to go in the Navy anyway because I got seasick. So, but these boys went in the Navy. One of them that went in was a real good friend of mine, and I'm going to diverge a little bit more than I normally do because I think it'll be interesting to you. He was a good friend of mine because back when I was younger, 12, 13 years old, they had this little town of Hornell, New York, had a very interesting thing going, and it was a tradition, and they had it every year, and that was a soapbox derby. And all the young boys made their soapbox racers, and Hornell was quite hilly, so we go down to Spruce Street, and it was a straight shot right down the hill. And they built this big platform with the front on it that drops down, and 2 racers go down, and then the winner of that one races the next one, and the winner of that the next one. So we went down and finally got to, I decided that year, I was like 13, and I was going to build a soapbox racer. I told my dad, and he said, fine, go ahead. And so I built, your parents can't help you when they're not supposed to. And so he gave me some ideas, and I put the soapbox racer together and entered the race. It was sponsored by the newspaper, Hornell Evening Tribune, and there must have been 28 or 30 kids boys in the race, and we all went down in our heats and everything, and then the winner goes to the next heat and kept going down. We finally got to the final heat, and it was Raymond Peck, my good buddy, and me. So we went down the hill, and Raymond Peck beat me. And it really shook me up because the winner was going to go to the Majestic Theater the following Saturday and get have you ever heard of Pat O'Brien, the movie actor? Back in those days? Probably not, but anyway, it's going to be the Pat O'Brien Trophy. And Pat O'Brien was flying in to present it. And I missed out on that. So we got down, and the two racers are sitting down there, one over here and one over there. And as much as this doesn't sound like a true story, it really is. We're sitting there with the 2 final racers, and they were talking about how they were going to present it. I got something for being the runner-up, but all of a sudden the newspaper reporter was sitting there, and he said, "Hey, Raymond Peck's wheels look bigger than his." And so they pulled the racers over together, and Raymond Peck's, my wheel was this wide, and Raymond Peck's was about 1 inch wider. Well, now if you multiply that inch by 300 times it goes around, then he's going to beat me by about 300 inches, right? That's just about what it was. So they said, now my dad was there, and they said, we're going to disqualify Peck. He has the wrong, because you had to have soapbox wheels, a certain diameter. Why they didn't check them before the race, I'll never know. But anyway, so he's qualified. My father was sitting there, and he said, no. He says, you don't do that with young boys. That's not the way to do it. He said, what do you suggest? He said, I can remember this like it was yesterday. My dad says, what we do is we give Raymond Peck 1 week to get the right size wheels on his racer. Then we all meet here again next Saturday, put the ramp up, and just run the 2 racers down the hill. The winner wins the race. So that they did. And he got the right size wheels, and they kept the 2 racers. In other words, I couldn't take my racer home. They kept them so that nobody could get at anything. So the following Saturday, got up on the top of the hill, fired the gun, the ramp went down the hill. I won. And so I got the soapbox trophy. And the reason I tell you this is because Raymond Peck was one of those guys that didn't want to go in the Army. He preferred the Navy. So when we finally got up to draft age, 5 years later, why we were all set to go down to go in the Army, and a couple of months before, about 5 or 6 guys from the senior class decided they were going to go in the Navy. So they quit high school, went down and enlisted in the Navy, and went off to boot camp or wherever they went, and I think here at Great Lakes. And he was assigned to the USS Yorktown, and it was sailing over in the Pacific. We were fighting when the war with Japan was going. And as you all maybe remember, the Yorktown was sunk. And I think in Manila Bay or in the Philippines. And Raymond Peck went down with it. And so his choice of the Navy wasn't a very good one. Why do I say this? Because after the race, Raymond Peck became my sister's boyfriend. So anyway, in 1943, I had to register for the draft. I went down with all the other boys to Camp Upton, Long Island. We went into the Army, and then we had to go in front of a panel of officers, which I never quite understood. And there was a colonel there and a couple majors or captain, and they asked you a few questions, and we didn't know this was coming. And so I went in, and he said to me, he says, what'd you study in high school? And I said, oh, you regular college entrance thing. He said, did you have algebra? And I said, yes. He said, did you have geometry? And I said, yes. He said, anything else? And I said, well, trigonometry too, but I didn't do red hat in that. Didn't flunk it, but I did take those. And he reached over and pulled this. I never knew how important that was. He reached over to this stamp pad, you know, where they have the stampers. He pulled one off, put it in the ink, hit my piece of paper, and handed it to me. And it says artillery. And artillery uses quite a bit of math. And all the other boys coming out were getting infantry, and that's where I didn't want to go. And too much walking. But anyway, I proceeded from Camp Upton, Long Island, to the artillery training base down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's FARTC, Field Artillery Replacement Training Center. I had 17 weeks basic training there, and it was pretty rough. We did those 30-mile marches and 30-mile runs and lay on the ground all night and come back the next day, that kind of thing. But I got through it, as we all did, and. Then when we finished, I got a 7-day delay en route. That's what they called it, 7-day delay en route to go home and see my parents and report to Fort Meade, Maryland. So this is in very late 43 in December. So I went home, saw my parents, got back down to Fort Meade, Maryland, And we were in Fort Meade, Maryland for a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden they put us all together and went down and got on a train and went up to Boston. And they had some Army trucks and everything. We got off the train, the trucks took us down to Boston Harbor. And we knew it was coming. We got down to Boston Harbor and we couldn't believe our eyes. The whole harbor was full of LST landing craft, landing ships, the kind you use in invasions. What they had was 52 of them in the harbor, and they were shipping them over to England for the invasion coming up. And there's on the front of each LST is a hospital. So after they land on the beach, they can go out and pick up any wounded or anything and bring them back onto the boat and back off and go back to England. And they didn't want to send the boats over to England with the hospital beds all empty, so they put 25 Army guys in each one of the ships, and over to across the ocean it went. We got on board, and the captain, I don't remember what rank he was, lieutenant, senior grade or something, Navy, was captain of the boat, and he got us 25 Army guys all together, and he said, okay, I'll never forget his speech. He said, you're not in the Army anymore. He said, for the next 30 days, you're in the Navy. And you're going to pull Navy watch, you're going to pull Navy KP, and if we ask you to paint the deck gray, you're going to paint, and if you're going to scrub this, you're going to scrub that. So we didn't have a lot of choice, so we just kind of saluted and said, yes, sir. And so we sailed out of the harbor. I've got some pictures of it here, where I started out over there. We sailed up to out of the harbor, up to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And then the convoy assembled there, and then we zigzagged across the ocean. At one point we were way down by the Azores in Spain. Then we went way up around Ireland, down through the Irish Sea, and then landed in England. We pulled our Navy watch and our everything. It took 29 days, because the top speed of an LST is as I said, 6 miles an hour. And I think of the 29 days it took to get over there, I think I was sick 28. And the Army guys were, we were tossing it all over the boat. So we got to Europe and landed in England, and then in Falmouth, England, and they had a troop train there, and they took us up to Barry, Wales, and they had a camp, an artillery camp up there in Barry, Wales, where we did some more training. And by that time, we heard the rumors were going around that we were closing in on the invasion of Europe. We went in a different camp in England, and then we ended up over in a camp just outside of London, just north of the English Channel. When we got over there, we thought, oh boy, now we can get to go into London, because we hadn't been able to get there. And the minute we got there, we were told that we were restricted to the base. No going to London. So I didn't get into London at all. And we were there just a matter of a few days. And then we left, and we went down to the port down there in southern England and got on the LSTs. And I got on a different LST, not the one I went overseas on, a different one. And we pushed off, and all the LSTs were assembling out there, and we kind of went up the English Channel ways, and they were just kind of maneuvering around so that we could, everybody could go over. So I went across the English Channel, And we got over to the invasion, and what they did over there was the Navy knew what they were doing, of course, but certain ships landed, and then the other ones would come in later, and so forth. But I got to tell you another thing before I get into the landing, which was real brilliant on the part of the United States of America. What they did, all the communications out of London and American headquarters and everything, led everybody to believe that General Patton was commanding the invasion. And Patton was going around London talking to ladies' clubs and PTAs or whatever they have over there. And he was doing all these speeches and everything. And they would put it on the radio and put it in the newspapers that Patton was talking over here and he's talking down here. And next week he'd be over here. And this was pure and simple, nothing but to deceive the Germans. Because they would hear this and they'd say, well, if Patton's running the invasion and he's running around talking to ladies' clubs, then the invasion apparently isn't going to occur right now. What it was. You know what else they did? I didn't see this, but I've got evidence. The invasion occurred over here where the English Channel is 84 miles wide. Up here at Calais, Dover, England, Calais, France, right here, is 18 miles wide. If you're going to have an invasion, this is the place to have it. I mean, you don't have all that distance to haul all your stuff. So what they were trying to do from then on is to give the Germans the impression that the invasion was going to be here, while we knew damn well it was going to be down there. So what they did, they put out word that General Patton would be leading the invasion. In the meantime, as I say, he was going around talking to ladies' clubs. Down in this part of England down here, near Calais, Dover, is where the German planes came over to bomb England. And they were coming over every day. They'd come over, bomb England, and then if they didn't get shot down, they turned around and go back. You know what the Americans did here? Brilliant. They had a whole bunch of tanks made up. See those 4 guys holding that 36-ton tank off the ground? Mm-hmm. The tanks were made out of rubber. Oh, wow. They were maybe Goodyear tire and rubber made them, I don't know. But they were inflated. And they were blown up with air. And they parked them, dozens of them, all around the fields down here. And when the Germans would fly over to bomb England, they'd look down and say, look at all those tanks down there. The invasion's got to be here. And so they go tell their bosses, and they were convinced that the invasion was going to be there. So when we landed where we were supposed to land down here, we crossed the channel, landed down here instead of up here. It wasn't defended anywhere near as well as it might have been had they released the troops to come down there and defend it. So the invasion became a success immediately, and we pushed on in. And the 4th Division, what I was in, the 44th Field Artillery 4th Division, our job was to land on the beaches. Then we were to go in and make a right turn, go right up to the end of the Normandy Peninsula, and there's a port up there, large port, French port, called Cherbourg. And it had a lot of docks and everything. And the one thing that they knew was going to happen, without a doubt, is when you land on the beaches in Normandy, on those sand beaches, it's awful hard to land to unload gasoline and shells and all of the stuff that's necessary to keep a war going. Food. It's just very difficult to land it in sand. We needed a port. And so the 4th Division, which is what I was in, that was our job. We went up and took the port of Cherbourg. And we got it. The Germans didn't make it easy for us, but we did get it. And I was very fortunate in that, I can't remember, did I show you these pictures of the guys holding the tank? And I was in the M7 tank. This is a picture of it here. What it is, it's a tank, but it's actually artillery. It's a 105 millimeter cannon mounted on a tank which had the turret taken off from it. It doesn't have a turret on it. They just mount the artillery on it. So instead of pulling the artillery around with a truck, you just self-propel it. And it's a 105 cannon right on the front. And that's what I was on the whole war. So we pulled our tank into Cherbourg after we took the town. They parked the tank right in front of the I guess you call it the village hall, or the hall, or where the Burgermeister has his office. And hanging down the front of the building was this Nazi flag. And I leaned down to the driver in our tank, Rufus Angel, and I said, "Hey, see that flag hanging on the building over there?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "That's mine." He says, "You got it." And so I went over and I got a hold of it and yanked it down off the building. And I just thought this is it. That's it.
Yeah.
That was hanging lengthwise right down the front of the building. I thought maybe it would, of course I keep it folded up, but I thought by now it might get messed up a little bit, but it doesn't. I can fold it later. After I got the flag, we were back. We went back down, came back down from Cherbourg down from the peninsula to start moving into France. And we came down to St. Lo. And St. Lo is very famous in World War II. This is where we broke through the German lines. It's called the St. Lo breakthrough, obviously. But the biggest problem was, this was worse than the invasion because the Germans have gotten brilliant and they realized the invasion was not going to be here, so they released their panzer divisions and their SS troops from up in Calais and come down and surrounded St. Lo, where we were going to break through. So I was, before St. Lo started, I had my flag, and I was over there, and our commanding officer, Captain Paddock, came walking by and he said, "What are you doing, Carter?" And I said, "Folding up my flag, and I'm going to put it in a hand grenade box and put my mother's name and address on it and ship it home." And he says, "You're dreaming." And he said, "Every box has to be open." He says, "It'll get back to the rear and some colonel will look at it and say, 'Ooh, boy,' and your mother's address will go off from it and his mother's address will go on instead." And I got up, and I usually try to be smart alecky with your commanding officer, but I said, "Exactly what options do I have?" He says, "None." So I addressed it to my mother, and about 3-4 weeks later I got an email from my mother, and she says, "Your flag arrived." And somebody was honest. And she took it up to Tuttle and Rockwell's, which was the department store in Hornell where we lived, and they put it in the window, and it was in there for about 4 months, she said, with a little plaque on it where it came from. Now, when we did the St. Lo breakthrough, what we did was, this is a very interesting story. Not a nice story, but very interesting. The commanding general of the 8th Air Force out of England, American, General McNair, he went into Eisenhower and he said, you know, I've been sending my bombers over to bomb Germany for a year and a half or so now. And he says, I never get to see the bombing. You know, I don't see the effectiveness of it and everything. And he said, we're going to go bomb the daylights out of the Germans around St. Lo, where there are gardens to keep us from coming across France. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring my staff and myself and go over to St. Lo and go up on the front lines with the 4th Division, which is what I was in, and we'll watch the effectiveness of the bombing. And Eisenhower said, yeah, go, good idea, go ahead. So they all came over. You may have read about this years ago, but they all came over and went up. We didn't see them, but they got up to the front lines. The commanding general and about 12, 14 other people with him, all high-ranking officers. And the lead bombardier, who was bombing the Germans, made a wrong calculation. Instead of coming down this road, he came down this one instead. Killed General McNair and his whole staff. And you don't read much about that, but that did happen in the war. And so we got past that, and we went on across France. Not much trouble. But, you know, continuous fighting all the way. And we went right up to Paris, right to Paris. And this is one of the big pet peeves that we have in the 4th Division, is that we moved in and took Paris. And I've got memories of our tank going down the Champs-Élysées right by the big tower and the whole thing. And all of a sudden we got down there and this command car came up with a colonel in it, big eagles on his shoulder, and he says, we have to get out of here. And we said, why? We've been weeks trying to fight to get to Paris, now we got to get out. He said, well, General Eisenhower told de Gaulle he could take it. So we packed up all that stuff, got out of Paris, and de Gaulle came in and marched down the Champs-Élysées and took Paris. But they wanted some American troops to be with them, you know, to walk behind them. So the 28th Infantry Division had just landed at Le Havre, and they had nice, clean uniforms on. So they shipped them all into Paris, and they all marched down 8 columns wide and took Paris. Boy, were we mad. Yeah. And but what we did, it all worked out kind of good, because what we did, we pulled out of Paris when the colonel told us we had to go, and we went out to a little town on out from Paris down the Seine River. Paris is on the Seine River, as you know. Went down the river into a little town. It must have been 20, 25, 30 miles down there, and the other parts of the 4th Division went elsewhere, but in our group, our 44th Field Artillery, went into this little town called Bondy-on-the-Seine. And neat town. Not very big, and way smaller than Libertyville. And we get down there, we're cleaning up our tanks the next day, and all of a sudden this whole bunch of people came down. Men, women, young people and everything. They all come down and they pull in a cart. They got down there, and what do you think they had? Red and white wine that they had hidden in their basements. And so we relieved them of it. we had a good time. We were there about about 3 days until de Gaulle took Paris, and then we saddled up and moved on across Europe, and we got into. Let me be sure I'm covering anything here. We got into Germany. Well, first of all, we got into Luxembourg. We were in Luxembourg. Then we were in Belgium a while, and we got over and Germany was just on over, and we were this one night. By now it's about Christmas time, and this one night we're on the shores of the Moselle River, which flows into the Rhine River, and we just had to put some guards out that night along the river, and in combat, when you go on guard duty, you don't do it like like the gun over your shoulder walking down like this. Guard duty in combat is you go down and you find some weeds down there and some brush, and you get down in it along the river, and there may be another guy about 25, 30 feet down or 40, and we did that, and we got down. I'm telling you a story now that my wife wouldn't let me tell, but we got down there, and I was on guard duty that night, and so I'm down in the weeds on the Moselle River, and in Luxembourg, and there was another guy from one of the other tanks. His name was doesn't matter, but his name was Gilbert Mell, and I knew him not well. And there was a number of us on guard duty. We had to surround all of our tanks for the night, and then we be on guard duty a couple hours, and then they'd bring somebody else. Anyway, we get down there, and Mel is, I'm here, and Mel is over about 15, 20 yards over there, and it got to be about. Every now and then, you just to be sure you nothing goofy happened. Why you'd holler, "How you doing, Mel?" "I'm okay." Or somebody'd say, "How you doing, Carter?" "Hey, I'm okay." Like that. And so we were there about an hour and a half, and I said, "How you doing, Mel?" "Nothing." "Mel, how you doing?" "Nothing." So I looked at my watch, and I said, well, they're going to change the guard in about 15 minutes. So 15 minutes later, the sergeant of the guard comes down, puts a new guy in my place, and then we go over to 20, 30 feet away to replace Mel, and he's not there. Now, I don't know if you know how it works in combat, in the Army or Navy or anything, but that's a no-no. And so they try to, where the heck is Mel? And so the sergeant of the guard went down in the brush in the hole down there where he was, and he came out, and he's got a bottle. He says, "Oh boy, we got a problem, guys." He had a bottle of, I don't remember, it was schnapps or Calvados, one of those things, and it was empty. And so we got back to the guardhouse, which we had taken over a farmhouse there, and we got to the guardhouse, and we went in. Sergeant went in, and I was smart. I kept my mouth shut, and he said, the officer of the day, the first lieutenant, was sitting there, and he said, "We can't find Mel." Oh, whoopee. And, well, get a group together and go out. He can't be that far, and find him. So we went out, and I was not with the group, and they went out. They went up and down this, right near the town, and all of a sudden they get over this house, and here's Mel sitting on the front steps over there, stone drunk. And so they went up to him, and the lieutenant, the officer of the day, was there, and he said, Private Mel, he said, I was told this, I wasn't there. Private Mel, you're under arrest for leaving your guard post drunk on duty and all that kind of stuff. So they got him standing up, and he put his hand back about this far and got a great big haymaker and hit the lieutenant right in the face and knocked him down on the ground. Now the lieutenant was mad. He said, put him under arrest. Take him back to the guardhouse. So they took him back, got him back there, and called the military police. And they said that they were backed up or busy or whatever, I don't know, and they were going to be there for about 4 hours. So about 4 hours later, they came and they took Gilbert Mel away. And about the war went on, and the next day we fired our guns and fought the war and fought the Germans and everything. In the meantime, the Battle of Bulge started. So then it was getting real critical. And we finally got through that. And all of a sudden one day, Captain Paddock came over. Our captain, he whacked on the tank. He said, hey, Carter? And I said, yeah. And he says, be at my command car tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And I said, can I ask for the reason? And he said, just be at my command car tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And so I got there, and there was me and the lieutenant that was on the guard duty, and the captain. We all got in his command car, and we went down the road, and we said, Captain, would you mind if we asked where we're going? He said, we're going into the city of Luxembourg for a general court-martial. Ooh. Different levels, some of you may know, different levels of court-martial. General court-martial is the top one. So we got in there, and we're all waiting in this anteroom, and all of a sudden this first lieutenant come in, and he started giving us the ground rules. Okay, now this is what you're going to do. Military court is way different than civilian court. Civilian court, everybody sits there and you can see what's going on, you can hear what everybody else says. Military court is not like that. The only one you hear is you. Otherwise, you're not there. When you go in and talk, you hear you, but nothing else, so you better be accurate. And because you can't modify or wiggle around or anything. So we got in there, and I don't know how I was so lucky, but anyway, they called me first, and I went in, and it's very formal. And the table is sitting there, and it's got a 2-star general sitting in the center, and a couple colonels, one on each side. And you walk in, you know, when you make your salute and everything. And then they ask you several questions, a bunch of questions, and you answer them, and then you're excused. Then you go out. And unlike civilian court where you hear everything, all you hear is you. So I went out in the anteroom, in came the sergeant of the guard, he did his thing. Out, in came the lieutenant, who got hit. He did his thing. We all went out, and a little while later, we're probably out there maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours in this room, and they come in, they said, okay, we're ready now. So then we all went out together, and we went out and, you know, very formal out there and made our turn, and the general was there with his 2 colonels, and we come up to him. Whenever you go to a general, you salute, so we saluted him, and he looked up and he said, 2 paces to the rear. So we went 1, 2. Now we're back here, and it's further from us to the desk. Out walks Gilbert Mel. Hadn't seen him at all since that night. So he gets out. Boy, was he sober. He walked up and saluted the court and everything. And the general looked up at him and he said, Private Mel, you are hereby found guilty of 6 articles of war. Now, you can't say you didn't hear it, because the articles of war, those of you who are in the service, know that when you're in combat, they're read to you about every 30 days. So you can't say, gee, I never heard of that. So he said 6 articles of war. And we had talked about it, and I couldn't think of 6. I could only think of 5. I knew, you know, leaving a guard post, drunk on duty, assault of an officer. You know, and I could get 5. Where did he get 6? The 6th one was the best one of all. Can you guess what it was? When you do anything in combat, what are you doing? You're aiding the enemy. The 6th article of war that they read to him, he said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, aid to the enemy. And I was standing there and I said, ew. And he looked up at me and says, you're hereby sentenced to 50 years in Leavenworth prison. Hit the gavel down, and 2 big guards came in, got him by the arms and took him out. Now, you say, well, that's nice, but whatever happened, you know? Well, I got to tell the rest of the story now. All that time went by, and I figured he was probably going to get out of prison early, and he'd come find the captain and the lieutenant and me, and that'd be our Waterloo. But about 7, 8 years ago, my wife and I, real goofy, my wife and I were down in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. We have a timeshare down there. We were down there, and we were up at the pool. We got to talking with this man and woman that were sitting there right near us. And come to find out, she's a lawyer, big time, with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. So I said, ooh, boy. So I said, I'll get you a pencil and paper. So we did, and she wrote down, I said, when you get back to Washington, the guy's name that was sentenced to 50 years in Leavenworth is Gilbert Mell. And would you look it up and find out, you know, what the heck ever happened? Did he serve his 50 years? Did he get out on good behavior? You know, what happened? And she said, well, if I can. And I frankly didn't think I'd ever hear from her. And we came home, and about 2 weeks later, I was in the family room, and phone rang. My wife answered it, and she said, hey, remember the lady lawyer down in Cabo? And I said, yeah. She says, here she is. And I got on the phone with her, and she says, remember now, you don't know me and I don't know you. This is Gilbert Mell, died in his 46th year of his prison sentence. I said, wow. I said, I thought probably he got out early, you know, good behavior, and didn't spend that long. She says, the way I'm reading it, there was no good behavior. That's what she said. There was no good behavior. It was never commuted. But he died at 46 years. So I was relieved, because he's not going to come after me now. Yeah. But I just thought I'd tell you that little human interest story. We went across to Germany, and the war finally ended, and but there is one episode that I wanted to tell you about, which was quite interesting, and every now and then I think back of it, and I can't believe I did it. But when we crossed the Rhine River, we got over the other side of the river, and in a town is called Prum, Germany. So I remember it, and we got over there quicker than the Germans thought we were going to get there, and we caught the German headquarters for that area of the war. Caught the German headquarters intact, and they were grabbing their stuff to get away, but we captured them. And we captured the commanding general. And the infantry guys had him coming out of the thing with his head on his head. I got to find out where I did my thing. He had his hands on his head, and he, I went up to him. I don't know why I got so brave, but I went up to, I had the gun, and I went up to him, and around his neck, you know, those Germans, they have that iron cross. Neat. So I went up to him, and I whacked on his neck like that, and he took it off and pulled it down, and I got his iron cross. And it says on here that there's a Nazi emblem on it, that, according to the date and everything, he got it when the war first started, when they were blitzkrieging across Poland, and he got his Iron Cross then. A couple of years later, did you ever do something you think is real nice, and it all blows up in your face? A couple of years later, I was talking to somebody, and I showed them the cross, and they said, well, that's nice, but did you get the rest of it? I said, the rest of what? He said, this. He said, the crosses are all the same. It's the ribbon that's holding it on. It tells you what level it is and how good it was, or how and all that. I didn't know that. All I did was pull it off, and I got the cross, but how good it was, I'll never know. The other thing I thought you'd be interested in seeing is, as we were fighting over there, they would go up in an airplane, and smaller planes, and this is when the war started closing in into the end. And what they would do is they figured that a lot of the German soldiers they'd been fighting for a lot of years, and they'd about had enough, and they were getting ready to get through. Oh, thank you. Getting ready to get through, so our army came up with a good idea. And what they would do is the planes would go over, and they would drop these leaflets down. This is actually a copy of it. It's a safe conduct voucher. And then after we get into an attack or go into a town or anything, if any of the Germans came out holding this, why, we would take them prisoner. And was scared. And it's in English on the one side and the German on the other. And it says, if you give yourself up, that we'll take you to a prisoner of war camp, and you'll be safe and everything. I thought that'd be interesting to you. I don't want to miss anything here. When the war ended, we got into Germany, and then for whatever reason, I don't know, the generals decided the 4th Division would just go south. So when the war ended, we were in Nuremberg, in a little town outside of Nuremberg, and called Neumarkt, Germany. And we then entered, at that point, the most dangerous time of a war. You know when the most dangerous time in the war is? Probably somebody does. When it's over. The people who won the war all know that they won the war. The people who lost the war don't know they lost the war. The communications all broke down. There's nothing going on. So our captain called us aside and told us, he said the war ended, but now is the problem. And we went in, not our Alpha directly, but the 4th Division had jeeps and command cars that went on ahead into towns, and we had 7 or 8 guys killed. and they'd be sitting in there, and as the command car come in, they would shoot them. They thought the war was still going on. And so we finally got that accomplished, and we were going into some of the towns with loudspeakers and telling them it was over. But the only problem we had with loudspeakers is we didn't have enough people talk German, because we sure couldn't tell them in English.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to forget anything. After the war ended, we stayed there in the Army of Occupation for about a month, 6 weeks, and then we were down in the southern Germany, and then they told us that we were going to go back home, and we didn't realize what the involvement was there, but the whole 4th Division, which I was in, we all got in zillions of trucks, and we went back across Germany, back into France, and went all the way back to Le Havre, France. Got in a great big troop ship, British boat, Countess de Savoy, in Le Havre, and sailed all the way back to New York Harbor. We didn't get very much Army of Occupation duty, which disappointed me a little bit, but we soon found out exactly why we didn't. We got back to New York, got the big welcome that you've seen on TV and everything, and then we each had 30 days delay, what they call delay en route. So we had 30 days to go home, see your mother, father, girlfriend, wife, whatever, and then be in Camp Butner, North Carolina on the 30th day. So we did. I got home, had a blast, and saw everybody. And then by this time, the war ended in Europe in May. Then we stayed till about July, and now we're getting the end of July in that area. We're on the train. I was on the train from Hornell, New York, going to Newark, New Jersey. Then changed trains to go down to Camp Butner, North Carolina. Had to go down to Fayetteville, then over. Well, we're on the train from Hornell to Newark, New Jersey. The war ended in Japan. And they were coming along the train holding the newspapers up. Japan surrenders, war's over, and all that. So we got off the train in Newark, and I did something I never did before, and I never thought I would. We were in the train station, about 4 or 5 of us. I didn't know any of them, but they were going the same place I was, but I didn't know them. And we got a train station. We're walking down the station, and all of a sudden this bird colonel comes up, a colonel with big eagles on his shoulder. He's apparently one of those stateside guys, and he's got his briefcase with us, and he's walking up there, and we went up and saluted him. And we said, Colonel, we got a serious problem. He said, what's that? And we said, we have to be down at Camp Butner, North Carolina tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and the war just ended. He says, yeah, well, how well I know. And he said, we're in Newark, New Jersey, which is about 4 miles from Times Square. And Times Square is the place to be when the war ends of the entire world. He says, hey, I got to admit that. And he said, so what are you going to do? And we said, well, we don't know. We're going to go AWOL, I guess, and go to Times Square. And I says, what do you think they'll do to us if we arrive a day late down at Camp Butner, North Carolina? You know what he said? Not a damn thing. And I said, are you sure? And he said, go. So we went to Times Square. We had Times Square. Everybody in the city of New York kissed us. Yeah. You saw all the pictures. And then we went over and stayed free at one of those Army places where you go and get a cot for the night. We stayed there and got up the next morning and came back over leisurely and got a train down to Upton, North Carolina, and arrived a day late. Walked into the room and the officer of the day was sitting there, never said a word. We walked in, we signed in, and we said, we're kind of a day late, and he says, yeah. Isn't everybody? So we stayed in the camp, and what we were supposed to do, we were supposed to re-equip, regroup, and get all new equipment and everything, then proceed from there out to San Francisco, to Okinawa, and then the 4th Division, I have it, believe it or not, in writing right over there. The 4th Division was to land on the plains of Tokyo. And we didn't have to do it. And so we stayed in Camp Butner, North Carolina, for a couple, 3 months. And it was right around, well, I remember it was Halloween. And I got, called me in and I got discharged. They gave me my discharge paper and my $183 or whatever I had coming, and I went home. And I had enough, when you go to combat and you're stateside and then go to combat, you get so many points on your GI Bill thing for stateside service, and then double points when you're overseas. So I had a lot of points, and so I figured I went home, and my dad says, "How many points you got?" And I said, my dad was a taskmaster, and he said, "How many points you got?" And I said, "Well, I really don't know. I got quite a lot." And he said, well, he said, "You're not going to let him go to waste, are you?" And I said, "Oh, no." He said, "Well," he said, "what you're going to do," he says, "I'll loan you the car, and you could spend the next 2 weeks, go up to the University of Buffalo, University of Rochester, Syracuse University, Cornell, all the schools around New York, and then when you get done, come back and tell me which one you're going to go to." And so I would look them all over, and I really liked the University of Buffalo. And out here, you probably haven't heard much about it. It's it'd be like going to Northwestern out here. There's a medical school, the dental school, the law school. It's a big deal in Buffalo. Very top-rated school. So I said, I want to go to the University of Buffalo. So I packed my stuff and I went up and registered. And they did something that I never had heard of. Still haven't. They said that if you're coming from the Army, Navy, Marines, whatever, it's been quite a while since you were in high school. And number one, you can't remember all the stuff you learned. Number two, you can't remember how to study. And so you're going to have to get that under your belt before you start in. So I had to go to University of Buffalo much earlier than I thought I would. I went to the Army, Navy, Marine preschool session, and it was 4 weeks. And what you did in those 4 weeks is you learned everything you learned in high school. And it crammed in. We went 8 in the morning and then we were working into the night. And you learned all your algebra over again, and all your geometry and all the stuff. And you learned to punctuate sentences and the whole deal. And there was quite a number of guys that flunked out of that, because you got an exam at the end. And I passed, went in the University of Buffalo my freshman year. And with the GI Bill, they realized that this was kind of an unwritten law, but they realized that you'd been out of school for quite some time, and you don't know how to settle down and study and all that kind of thing. So they give you a pretty long leash for the first 2 years, but after the second year, you either did it or you're out. So that was pretty crucial. And I worked hard, and I got through my freshman year, and then I went right straight through the summer, and then got through my sophomore year. I was in a rooming house there were 4 of us, four guys, all of us ex-GIs, Army, and after the first initial year at the University of Buffalo, 2 years, in your trial period, 2 of us went on to junior, and the other 2 flunked out.
Oh, wow.
So they were serious.
Yeah.
So it went on through, and I graduated from the University of Buffalo, and then my last year I went all around Western New York. I didn't know about Libertyville or anything, and I was from up that way, so that's what I was familiar with. Went all around Western New York looking to find out where I was going to get a job after I got done. And I went into Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, all those. And I got my best offer from Bausch & Lomb. You've all heard of that. And I wanted to go into sales in something that wasn't simple, like selling magazines or anything like that. So I got into the scientific instrument sales, microscopes, refractometers, spectrophotometers, and all that stuff. And I enjoyed it. I was there for quite a while, and then they sent me, any new trainee, any new person coming into Bausch & Lomb, after they get the initial training at the factory, we actually had to build a microscope. Build it we couldn't leave till we did. We had to build a refractometer, we had to build a spectrometer, and have it pass inspection. So after we got done, then they sent you to Chicago, and there was a gentleman here in Chicago named Mike Seelinger, and he'd been with Bausch & Lomb forever, and he trained you for selling outside and everything. And I needed it, and so I got out there and I did my training with him, and then he told me I needed industrial experience. So they sent me to Detroit. Now you get the industrial experience in Detroit. I called on Ford and General Motors and Chrysler and all that. That's industrial experience. Then after I got done there, they opened an office in Cleveland. Didn't have one there before. And I went to Cleveland and opened the office there, and I covered Ohio, Kentucky, half of Indiana, and West Virginia. And I did that for about 15, 18 years. And then they called me up one day. I was really, I sound like I'm bragging, but I was really, really pleased. Mike Seelinger, who was the top guy in the sales, he decided to retire. He was about 68. So they went into him. Now I'm going to sound like I'm bragging here, but I don't care. They went into him, the big boss, the VP, and said, "Okay, we're going to do something, Mike, we never did before." And he said, "What's that?" And he said, "You trained everybody in the company. Pick your replacement." I got it. So I moved to Chicago, moved here, and the office for years was down on 18 South Michigan Avenue. And that's where I worked when I was here in the office. And that was there because Mike Seelinger lived at 1400 North Lakeshore Drive. Nice. Why you want an office on Michigan Avenue and down in the Loop is beyond me. There's no parking, and people can't get to it. So I phoned the boss in Rochester, and after I was there about a year and a half, I didn't want to do it too quick. And I said, this is stupid coming down here. And he said, he surprised the heck out of me. He says, "Couldn't agree more." He says, every time I used to come out there, I wondered, what the heck do they have office down here for? You can't park, you got to go up in the elevator. He says, "Where do you want to move it?" And I said, "Deerfield." He says, "Go." So you know down in Deerfield where you go down around the corner, all that industrial park down there, we were right there, right next to Walgreens. I moved it out there. And it stayed there until I hung it up and retired. And haven't been sorry about it at all since. The other thing you can ask me is when we moved over here, we looked over a lot of places to live, and we decided Libertyville. And we had our house built down on Dover Court by Barney Loeb, and I still live there. And my wife and I both. She passed away 2 years ago. But the thing I wanted to tell you, which is was important, is after the war, all these things came up, and I wanted to sure be a part of it. So you've heard of the honor flight to Washington, and I got to do that, and that was very nice. It was a tough day. You get up about 3 in the morning. You get down to O'Hare at about 5, and the plane takes off, and you're in Washington like 7 or 8 in the morning. You lose an hour going, and then they take you in a bus all around, and they show you all of the military monuments and Lincoln Memorial. You know the whole thing. So I got to do that, and then I got to do another thing, which is a real bonus, and I really couldn't believe it. I met this guy one time, and he was from Texas, and he knew the people out in Texas, and there's a company in Texas that does homeschooling, and when you learn the stuff at home, well, you don't get as big a picture as you do if you go to school and all that, because your mom or dad are teaching you at home. So the kids learning at home didn't know anything about World War II, not much about it. So what they wanted to do is put something together on World War II that homeschooling kids could learn about the whole war. So don't ask me how I lucked into that one, but this guy put my name in, and I got a telephone call, and they asked me how I'd like to go back to Normandy. And I said, holy cats, is the Pope Catholic? Yeah. And and they said I could bring my wife and everything. So we went back to Normandy, and we flew into Paris, and we had a hotel in Paris, and we went out to Normandy, and we did a whole sequence in Normandy, the invasion and all that kind of thing. And what they did, they had a guy meet us and took us all around, and they put these together. This is Normandy, Final Farewell. And here's the guy that ran the company that did it, and this is me. And there's 2 other guys. This is British. I don't remember what the other was. They're not all Americans, and this is a British guy. And we told the story, and it's all on a disc here. Then they made another thing. We had a PhD historian there, and they put this whole thing together here. And that's the whole story of World War II. And I lucked out. That's me.
That is
This is interviewing us about the war. And So I got to do that. That was quite an honor. Then that night, after we got done with all of that night they had a banquet in the little town where we were out in Normandy, and it was all, many years later, so it was all fixed up, beautiful hotel and banquet. And in the banquet was the ambassador, French ambassador to the United States, and he came up to each one of us, the three of us, just three of us, and he said, I want you to remember your trip over here while you were doing that. And he hung this on each one of us. I think I got it wrong. Here we go. It says Normandy. It's got the French flag and the American flag on it. There are only 3 of these in the world. The other 2 guys. And now I guess there's only 1 because I heard the other 2 fellows are both passed away. So I'm still around. I did want to show you a couple things here. Do you have any questions at all? Hope you'll interrupt if you do. Yes?
I'm curious, you have like your own,
I don't hear good.
you have like your own museum here. First of all, thank you for your service.
Yeah,
It's amazing
I enjoyed it.
sharing your story. But you have so many of these amazing artifacts. I'm curious what you'll do with them. Like, do you display them in your home, or do you keep them in a box, and then are you going to?
I keep them all at my home.
Are you going to share them, like what
And
with them eventually?
I'm going on 97, so
Yeah.
so when I'm not here anymore, that's my son back there.
Okay.
He lives in Rockford, and he's going to confiscate everything. Few things more. Am I boring you yet?
No.
A few things more I thought you might like to see. You can come up afterwards if you really want to. I've got pictures of what landing craft look like that are landing on the beaches. This is what they look like. And the whole, your tanks and everything are inside, and the whole front opens up. Then there's a ramp that goes down, and you just stream about. But it's still very difficult on a sandy beach. And when we were overseas, to show you a few other things that may be of interest, our communication overseas, this is a letter from my aunt. That's a letter. And you fold it up, put it, and write the name on the front. Or if you have other stuff, and you can write, and it comes in the window. And this is the way we received mail and the way we sent mail in combat. When we went into France, just before the invasion, they gave us all this book. You can see it's pretty well worn. And this is the French to English dictionary. And if we were talking to the Frenchman and we couldn't figure out what to say, then we could look it up in here and figure out what the word was and tell them what we wanted. Then after we got out of France, they gave us a German one. Now you can see this is well worn, and this isn't. We couldn't fraternize. So this is practically new, but this tells you all the German words and what the English word is. The way we kept up with things over there while the war was going on was that we had a newspaper. It was printed in London, and it's called Yank, and every now and then we get a copy of it. And it had articles about how the war was going and how were things back home, and that kind of thing. And I got that. They're getting a little dilapidated now. This is another one. And these were not anything that they came up and passed out, and each one of you got one. They come up and give us, for our whole outfit, we get 4, and so they got worn. This, I had a German officer one time, not the general I got the cross from, and we took him prisoner, and I got this from him, and I relieved him of it, and it's got the German insignia on it and the swastika and the whole thing. I treasured that. The other thing I got, and you'll get a kick out of this, I think. I got a German Luger. I think I had it a whole week. And I had it sitting on the tank one day, and Captain Paddock came over. He said, "Whose Luger?" He was climbing up on our tank. He said, "Whose Luger?" And I said, "Mine." He said, "Where'd you get that?" And I said, we took some prisoners the other day, and one of them had a Luger, and I relieved him of it." And he said, "Do you want to listen to something?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "In a war, people get caught all the time, captured. If you're captured with a Luger, they'll shoot you. 10 seconds, you're done. Get rid of it." So a couple days later, we had the guys that come up from the rear. In World War II, no offense, no reason or anything, but they were most of them were African American, and they would drive the trucks up from the rear and bring us gasoline, ammunition, food, water, everything came up from the rear. And they weren't on the front lines or anything all the time. They just unload and go back. So one of them came up a couple days later, and he was unloading damn shells. I said, "Would you like a Luger?" You know, he about died and went to heaven, and I gave it to him. It hurt. I was at the gun store in Libertyville on Peterson Road a couple months ago, and I was telling him that I used to have a Luger, and I gave it away to the truck driver. He said, "Do you know what that thing is worth now?" I didn't know. $18,000. $18,000. He says, "That's what you gave away." So I'd like to have had it, but at the time I had to get rid of it. I don't think of anything else. If I have verification, this is a book here on the 44th Field Artillery of 4th Division. And there's my picture right there, so I can prove I was there. But the other picture, which I like to show everybody, it's falling apart. Want to read it?
I don't have my glasses. What is Sarah?
Theodore Roosevelt Jr.
Oh.
I'm about finished with my regular presentation, but you're all settled in so good. I can tell you another story. But yes, sir.
Could you? I see all your medals up there. Could you explain them out?
Yeah. I went into the war as a private. Then I got bumped up to corporal, and then sergeant. And when the war ended, I was in command of our tank, sergeant. This is the American Theater ribbon. You get it if you're just in the States and around here. This is the European Theater ribbon. And on the top of it, there's 5, you can see them there. There's 5 bronze stars across the top of it. And the entire war in Europe, the part we were in, there were some others down in Italy and Africa and those there. But if you landed in Normandy and went to the end of the war, you were in 5 major battles. And for each battle, you get a little bronze star, and you put it on that ribbon. So this is a European ribbon with 5 battle stars. This is good conduct ribbon. I behaved myself. This is the Battle of Bulge ribbon. This is the Occupation of Germany ribbon. And this is the Victory Medal.
Wow.
I was in the 4th Division, and I qualified on the carbine rifle and in the artillery. These are all of the things. I would be glad to tell you one more story, if you don't mind, if you want to hear it. I think it's extremely interesting. I've been doing the Memorial Day thing for Village of Libertyville for about 10 years. And 2014, I think it was, 2014, there was a young man from Libertyville, graduated from Libertyville High School, and his name was Schroeder. And his mother, I can't remember her first name, Schroeder, lived over off Lake Street. Maybe some of you knew her. She's since moved to Virginia. But he graduated from Libertyville High School, and he was appointed to West Point. So he went to West Point and graduated from West Point and got his second lieutenant things. And then he went over to Iraq, Afghanistan, did 3 tours of duty over there, and went from second lieutenant up to colonel. And he was a colonel, lieutenant colonel, and they brought him back and he was stationed at the Pentagon. So I asked him if he would, I said, I don't have any budget because I'm working for Libertyville, but you want to come back and give the talk for Memorial Day? He said, yeah, I'd be delighted. And so he came back, gave a talk for Memorial Day. And after the talk was over, his mother had a reception for him over at her house in the basement. And while he was sitting there, he said to me, don't ask me why I did this, but he said, why don't you come down to Washington sometime and I'll take you through the Pentagon.
Oh.
And I thought, wow. And regular people can't go through the Pentagon. You got to be invited and escorted. So I said, yeah, I'd be delighted. And so we sat there a little while, and he said, well, his party was breaking up. He says, well, you're coming down to the Pentagon in Washington or not? And I said, yeah, I am going to do it under one condition. And he says, ooh, conditions. And he said, what's your condition? I said, when I get to Washington, I want to meet General Odierno. He said, what do you want to meet him for? And I said, well, General Odierno was the 4-star general in command of, you know what? The United States Army. Top general of the whole Army. And he used to be with the command of the 4th Division when the 4th Division went over to Iraq. Remember when they pulled Saddam Hussein out of the hole in the ground? 4th Division. So I said, I want to meet him because I was in the 4th Division in World War II and he commanded the 4th Division. So if I come to the Pentagon, I want to meet General Odierno. I was just being funny. I went home, and about 4 or 5 days later, my wife came in and she says, oh my God, where do you see this? She handed me the laptop, and it's an email from Major somebody, a lady's name. She said, I understand you're going to be in Washington at the Pentagon and you would like to meet General Odierno. General Odierno would love to see a fellow 4th Division guy. Please be in our office on so-and-so at 10 a.m. Man, I went. Yeah. And I got down there, and I can't even describe it. It was like, it wasn't like a sergeant meeting a 4-star general. It was like meeting your uncle. He was just absolutely delightful. And I just happen to have a couple things here. Here's General Odierno. And me. He's in full uniform. Everything. Huh?
Is he that tall? He looks.
He's 6'6". Not a hair on his head. And we're sitting there, they're taking pictures, and he went over to, he had a globe in the side of his office. Oh, incidentally, there was a staff sergeant sitting over here, and he was recording everything, and another staff sergeant over there with a camera. And every now and then he'd come out and, and that's where these pictures came from. And here we are looking at my book, and more pictures here. He had a sweater on, which I'd never seen before. And maybe some of you are familiar with it, but instead of, when I first went in, he had this black sweater on. And the black sweater is an Army issue, and there's these 4 stars on the shoulder. But it's just a black sweater. Then it has a smooth piece over here where you put your name tag. And I admired the sweater. And here we are looking at the globe. And it was like talking to your uncle. And we got all done. This is the important picture. We got all done, and here we are here. I was in there, I'd say, I thought I'd get 10 minutes. I think I was in there just short of an hour, about 15 minutes. And he had his full uniform on, and he's shaking my hand, and I'm to leave. But there's something going on here. If I gave you the picture and you looked at it for 4 hours, you wouldn't know what's going on. The most important thing is going on of the whole day. I looked up at him when we shook hands, and I said to him, I said, if I didn't get this, I wasn't leaving. And every command officer in the Army, Navy, Marines, no matter what it is, has their own coin. Here's the American emblem. And then the back, the Army Creed. And around the outside it says, General of the Army, Raymond T. Odierno. They all have that. When he shook my hand, and this slid over into my hand, and I looked up at him, I said, I wasn't leaving if I did get that. I knew what they were because you remember I told you I went over to Normandy, and the commanding general from Europe was over there, and when I left him, he shook hands like that and passed off his. It's not quite as pretty, but it says, Commanding General, U.S. Forces, Europe.
Wow.
Now I'm going to show you another one, and you're from Libertyville, Illinois, and you should get this. But you won't. This was palm to me, too, also. Commander, Great Lakes Navy Base. The Admiral. If you play it right, when he says bye, they palm it to you. It just transfers. And so I was delighted to get those. Then about a week later, I got an envelope in the mail with all these pictures in it. And this one. Which was signed at the bottom. He's pretty tall.
Yeah, he is.
And then 2 weeks ago, I got the shock of my life. He died.
How old is he? Yeah, he looks very young.
67. They don't say in here from what, but this is just a couple weeks ago. 4-star Army General, Commander of Surge in U.S. forces during Iraq War. Anyway, he's no longer around. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, Don. Where did you sleep when you were over in World War II?
Where do you sleep?
Yeah, where do you sleep? Did you?
Anywhere. I slept. I pulled a canvas under the tank and shittied under the tank and slept there most of the time. But you only got that much room. You can't turn over. If you're going on your back and you want to go to your belly, you got to come all the way out and go back in. So I slept there most of the time, but you can only get about 4 guys under there. And it's pretty cozy, but then the rest of them have to sleep up in the... that's another thing that I had in my notes, that if you have a minute, you might be interested in this. Not only where do you sleep, where do you wash up? How do you get clean? How do you wash your hair? And it's pretty rare. It's sometimes only twice a month, but we would get a shower detail. What they did with the shower detail, they would line up. There was a group of guys. That was their job in the Army. And they would be about 15, 18, 20 miles behind the front lines. And they pull up to a river, creek, river, whatever, flowing river. And they take a big tube, hose pipe, put it out in the river, had a floater on the end of it so it stayed up on the top, didn't get down in the mud. And then they had a big pump on it, and they'd suck the water in out of the river, and it'd go up the top, and then it would come, something like these restaurants have. You see the thing with the flames shooting up, and the flames were shooting up, and the water would come in, and then it would whirl down through, and it would get warm. And by the time it got to the bottom, it was nice and warm, and then it'd come out into a pipe, and then the pipe would be as long as from here to the wall. And then they'd have a spigot, shower spigot, about every 4 feet. And what you do, and we all knew what to do, you would, the captain would organize it, and everybody from the tank can't go back, and just 1 or 2 guys at a time. And they get in trucks, and we go back to the shower, which would be maybe 15, 20 miles behind the rear. So we'd all get in the truck, and what you would do is get ready by wearing your oldest underwear, socks, and clothes, and you get out of the truck, go back. When you get there, you walk in. Now you have to realize it was difficult for me, but some of it isn't. But in the Army, there's no modesty. If you feel funny, well, you better get used to it quick. So what you do is you go in this big canvas place, like a tent, and you take off all your clothes, and you take all anything that you've got, your wallet or anything that's any good that you're in your pockets, and your wristwatch, and you put them in your shoes. And shoes are the only thing you're going to keep. Then you take your pants, your shirt, your t-shirt, your underwear, shorts, socks, and you just throw them in this pile. And they later on look them over, and if they're good enough to launder, they wash them and use them again. If they're not, they just dump them, I guess. And that's what we're told. So we then you're standing there, everybody, and you're stark naked, and that's just part of the deal. And all you have is your shoes, with all your worldly possessions in the shoes. So then you go into the next chamber, put your shoes down. We're all buddies. Everybody's honest. If they took your shoes, it'd be a mistake. There's no, your shoes. There's my shoes. Then you go and you get under a spigot, and you grab a bar of soap and you wash yourself all down. And then you go over and grab your shoes and go on over, and there's a guy over there with a whole pile of towels. And they throw you each a towel and you dry all off. And then you go over to the next chamber, and you threw the towels in the pile, go to the next chamber, and you go up to there's a whole bunch of, it's a room quite good size, there's a whole bunch of tables all around the room. And you go to the first one, you say, undershorts, 32, 36 t-shirt, 34 pants, 50.5 shirt, and put each one of them on, and give me a belt, and you put a belt on and all that kind of stuff, and you're all redressed. Sometimes it's new, sometimes it's laundered, sometimes it's washed, sometimes it's pretty neat, sometimes it's a little worn, and you don't even care. And you just put the stuff on, because in a couple more weeks you're going to dump it all anyway. And so then you go back and get in the truck and head back to the war again. That's the way they work it. It was that took a little getting used to. I don't mind telling you. 'Cause I don't like to parade around in my birthday suit, but that's just the way it is. And nobody cares. So it's just that's the way it's. I think the only time you're really shocked is the first time. And then I have another thing I tell every now and then. And I wasn't going to tell it to this group because this is a polished Libertyville group here. But I will anyway. Guess what else we had? Not for the reason you think. We had brown toilet paper. And you look and you say, well, why not, Why did we have brown toilet paper? We go into position with 4 tanks and all the other people, and there's about 90 guys all going over to the bathroom. They're going over to the bathroom, and we designate a certain area behind some trees as that's the John over there. Well, if all the guys are going over there and we had white toilet paper, then the Nazis fly over with their airplanes and look down and see all this white. They'd say, oh my gosh. So when they look down at the ground, you don't see anything because the toilet paper's brown. Not for the reason you thought. And that's just it's the way it was. I think they had some, I know they did. The Quartermaster Corps had some people come up after we leave that position. We might be in a position for a couple, 3 days and then go. And our captain and lieutenant would designate a John area and then all that. But then after we're gone, and 2 days later, then they have these crews that come up and bury everything. So, but we had brown toilet paper because of airplanes.
Gotta think of everything.
Are there any other questions there? You've been a good audience. I appreciate it. You're very interested, and I've done this a lot of times, and I hope I'm around to do it some more. I don't want to follow Odierno just yet.